Now to Senator Durbin, ranking member.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and glad you're holding this hearing. And the fact that you've held this hearing, and we had similar hearings when I chaired the committee, I think is a message to all and who are following us. This is bipartisan, and it should be, start to finish. And we have a real task ahead of us. As Senator Grassley describes the legislation that is pending, I can recall the hearing for Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. And one of the big issues brought up over and over again were the use of sentencing guidelines for abuses in this area that were written so long ago they didn't reflect the reality of the extortion which is going on today. And judges of the most conservative political stripe and the most liberal political stripe were reaching the same conclusion, that those guidelines just don't work anymore. They were counting offenses by the number of images. Well, that might have made sense when we were talking about 8x10 photographs. It makes no sense when we're talking about technology of today and the videos that are involved. So we've got to update that and show the reality of the situation. And I think that's something we can all work on together. I learned something else. We would get unanimous votes in this committee, if you remember right. Republicans and Democrats would both be voting for the legislation that we think would change things for the better. And then it disappeared. Disappeared between the committee and the floor. And the same is happening now. We make great speeches here. We sometimes enact great laws in the committee. But when it comes to taking them to the floor, to enact them on the floor and eventually send them over to the House, we drop the ball completely. That's got to end. There's no reason for that. To invite these witnesses, as compelling as they are, and then to ignore their testimony when it comes to executing on the floor is unacceptable. Let's kind of decide at this point that if you're going to have the nerve to give a speech here on the subject, you ought to have the nerve to do it on the floor and do it repeatedly. So let's have a sense of urgency in what we're setting out to do. I've worked with Senator Hawley, in fact, many others too, survivors, law enforcement, advocates, to put together the Stop CSAM Act. The bill takes a comprehensive approach to stemming the tide of online child exploitation. I've repeatedly said we must bring the same sense of urgency to protecting kids in the virtual world that we do in the real world. But the landscape of online child exploitation is changing dramatically by the day. Two trends in particular demand our attention: financially motivated sextortion and sadistic online exploitation. What once was rare is now epidemic. In 2021, NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, received a total of 139 cyber tips involving financially motivated sextortion. 2021, 139 tips. In the first 6 months of this year alone, excuse me, they've received 23,000 of these tips plus. Offenders often operated in coordinated criminal networks overseas, targeting teenagers in the United States, and we'll hear specific cases about that. They coerce them into sending a sexually explicit image and then threaten to release it unless money's paid. For too many families, this crime ends in tragedy. NCMEC has identified more than 36 young men in the United States who've died by suicide after being sextorted. We are joined by one of those families. I said hello to Mrs. Woods and thank her for being here. But she lost her son, James, 17 years old, when he was targeted. She's here in a courageous capacity, and thank you for being here, transforming unbearable loss into call for action. That photograph of your son in his track outfit in front of the hurdles tells the story. I'm sure he was a wonderful young man, and you cherish his memory by being here today. Another disturbing trend is a rise in offenders who do not just view or trade images of abuse, but direct real-time torture, encourage escalating violence, groom children to produce CSAM, and self-harm videos. NCMEC has identified this behavior as sadistic online exploitation. The threat is accelerating. The numbers tell the story. This is an unacceptable systemic failure, and what are we going to do about it? We're going to have a hearing. We're going to call witnesses. We're going to lament the situation. What are we going to do about it? Is there going to be a bill in the new session? To say that we're so overwhelmed with legislation on the floor we don't have time is a joke. Watch the Senate and tell me that we don't have the time to take this up. We have more than enough time to do it right. This committee has a history of tackling the tough issues. Mr. Chairman, it's up to you and me and those senators on both sides of the aisle to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.